Good afternoon, Diana, and thank you for joining us once again for this edition of Recount Watch. Today we'll be updating you on some of the current issues that we think should be brought to your attention for clarity and for guidance. My name is Hugh Todd, and with me this afternoon is Commissioner Robeson Benn, who will be discussing with us this afternoon some of the issues we think should be brought to your attention so that we can actually give you a very balanced and objective view on how you should go about analyzing what you're hearing in other from other sources. So thank you very much, Commissioner Benn, for joining us this afternoon.
Well, thank you for having me first on Zoom, is it? Yeah, thank you.
We're using Zoom, so we're practicing social distancing.
Yes,
I know you're very busy and you're very involved in the process. I have just a few questions to raise with you so that you can actually give us some insights from your personal perspective, from a perspective of the Commission as well, and generally what we've been speaking about here from the People's Progressive Party Civics end. Of concern to us and many of our citizens is the slowfulness in which the process is actually moving. We know that we've started off with a very low average, an average of like 2 boxes per station per day. We are averaging out at somewhere around 5 boxes per station. We've seen a dip yesterday as compared to Wednesday, when we had, I think, the highest. I think it was 63 or 62 boxes. Yesterday we had just over 50 boxes. So this is an issue that is of concern not to us at the People's Progressive Party Civics end, but I know it's a concern to you in the Commission as well as our international observers and the citizens at large. So tell us, what is your view on the process in terms of how we can move the process forward without actually affecting the integrity of the process itself?
Yes, well, thank you. The difficulty we have is from the very beginning, I think that there was an intention to drag out the entire recount process. You might remember the row about the 156 days.
Yes.
And then there were changes later, and that with all the effort that we made, it was said that we would be able to do this process in 25 days. But after a week, we will review.
Yes.
The project is badly designed. It is badly designed because we pointed out that at the very beginning, you needed at least 20 stations to do it in an efficient manner, and that in doing so, you could have gotten it done in 12 or 14 days. Mm-hmm. They adopted a posture of only establishing 10 stations, and the methodology of doing what is a basic recount, which really only requires you to look at rejected ballots and to count the ballots of every list. The methodology they adopted with a checklist is a painstaking one. There are questions as to whether the staff were really trained, because I did ask for them to run a simulation so the staff could be trained. This was not really done. And then there are interferences, interventions from all sides, and misinterpretations of what we had agreed, which ought to be done. There are some instances where we said certain issues should only be looked at only as deemed necessary, meaning not important. But they might take an hour before they start up and another hour to finish to deal with issues which are not really part of the process, are not central to the process. So the design is bad and the way they operationalize it is bad.
So just tell us.
This is, of course, deliberate. This is, of course, deliberate. There's no intention to have this process end in an optimum amount of time. And maybe there's a hope that something will be happening or some intervention may happen which could change things. But it is ridiculous. It is creating a lot of embarrassment. Persons have come here, observers, the OAS and others have come here, I think, for a limited time, practically. Yeah. And we're being exposed here again about our ability to count or to run simple things.
So Commissioner, if I may, could you give us could you bring the public up to speed with some of the issues that you believe are not germane to the process itself? We're supposed to be counting ballots, as I understand it. What are some of the things that they're actually raising that are causing the process to be laborious and creating a lot of bottlenecks in terms of moving?
Yes. Well, other than the extensive checklist, which even requires you to check the stubs or whatever of the ballots, and checking off all of the seals and the envelopes, all of which are compartmentalized. Those in themselves are painstaken, and it's not being done in the same way across the board to optimize the process. But beyond that, one list is always asking or raising questions. They have lists of persons, and they claim they would have these lists called out of the numbers on the ballot list to say eventually that all or some of those persons were not in the country on election day. Yeah. This has led to a lot of argument and delays, and then attempts to sort it out. Obviously, they're trying to build up a narrative somehow, and because it's usually only for PPP persons, people who voted PPP, and unfortunately, overwhelmingly Indo-Guyanese, they're trying to paint a narrative of fraud for the names that they call, which is ridiculous because, as you're aware, the presiding officer has at the place of poll a colored folio with the picture of every person who is listed.
Yes.
The party representatives, including the APNU, AFC, all have a copy of that folio in black and white. And they're usually persons from the community. And they would know those persons who come in, and if they protested, that person couldn't vote if somebody was impersonating. So they're trying to raise this ridiculous assertion, trying to create a narrative about this matter, which will fall on itself because in any event, the numbers they call can't change the overall effect of the PPPC victory. It cannot change it. And secondly, it's ridiculous because their representative in the polling place would have signed up that these persons who I helped to identify voted properly.
Yes.
And residency in itself is not a requirement for voting, as the Chief Justice, I think, ruled.
Yes.
And if you were in the country on election day, if you visited your family, or even if you came to vote to express your franchise or whatever list you preferred, there's nothing which could have prevented you from voting. So it's a ridiculous fabrication being created. And it is creating a lot of difficulty because it's delaying the overall recount process.
Okay. But following on from that, there is some hope that we may get additional counting stations. I know the commission has met, they've made a recommendation, and that is now up to the National COVID Task Force to approve the expansion of the counting process. Yes. I would like to hear your perspective on that, and if and when this process should come into effect.
Well, every day since this process started, and when we've had our meetings, I've said you needed to have additional counting stations, or else you'll be here for 60+ days. There are additional persons who have been trained or who are capable of doing the job, but they only work on alternate days. So the staffing is available to man those additional counting stations. But basically, there's a reluctance to put it in place. And unfortunately, it appears as though we have given over the question of additional counting spaces completely to the COVID task force. This is unfortunate in itself because we walked around. I walked around with the chairman herself. and with the CO, I identified at least 8 places where additional counting stations could be put in place.
Okay.
We have been at this for 3 days now. We should have had a response from the COVID task force at 10 this morning. There is no response, strangely enough. And every day that we don't have the additional task counting stations, we're behind by 40 or 50 ballot boxes not counted.
Yes, yes.
There appears to, like before, because initially when we came to this facility to determine the number of counting stations, I did point out the places where you could have 20 stations. But then it was decided we'll only do 10. And now that the problem is staring us in the face, we've seemingly abrogated our responsibility and handed it over to the COVID task force.
And how optimistic are you that the task force will give permission, given the fact that there's a lack of confidence in the
exactly. I don't know what they will come up with. If they were to look at it professionally, as we discussed, I even had them to look at plans of this building because I had the task of, as a minister, completing this building to have it ready as a national facility. I had them look at the plans of the management for the building, and it was obvious that the places were there. But the 2 issues are, one, the COVID task force. There is a sense that some of the people on the task force, based on their Facebook posts, are partisan politically, based on their expressions on Facebook. I think there's a Dr. Payne and some others who have been expressing partisan views on the matter in respect of political preferences. And now we have to rely on them to really come and get this process going forward. So there's that. That is the big problem. And secondly, there's the issue of the security. The place is smothered with security, more than is necessary. And they're also taking up spaces which could be more gainfully used. So we'll see what they'll come up with maybe tomorrow. But it's painfully obvious that we need more counting stations, and that in those counting stations, the staffers have to be more efficient at the tasks they have to do to get the country a resolution in this very important manner, so that we could move ahead. But I don't think that at the moment, given the lack of information and given the fact that the COVID task force basically is now headed by purely partisan and not even irresponsible and caretaker ministers and operatives, I don't think that we can at this point rely on them doing the right thing.
Yeah, so, I think a lack of trust is not good for us now in such a critical stage that we're at. And I'm hopeful that good sense will prevail and professionalism will emerge across the board so that we can see this as a national effort and not a partisan effort.
Well, they might be under some pressure themselves. There are some people who have invested in, since December 2019, who have invested everything in delaying the overall process. And I don't think they have given up. They don't know when to stop. And now, the fact I have pointed out in a meeting yesterday, that the longer we're here at the convention center with the problem of the COVID pandemic, we'll be exposing ourselves and more people by our residence time here. If we're here for 15, 20 days and we get out, we should be reasonably okay. But if we are here for 50, 60 days, there's a possibility that more people will have the risk of being exposed to the pandemic. And I don't know whether people care enough about that risk to deal with it.
Yes, that's point well taken. I'm hopeful that we can get some movement in that direction. As you already indicated, you've already made a recommendation before this process started to have 20
Yes.
workstations. If that
Yes.
was taken on board, we would have been almost halfway through the process, and we would not have
you'd
had
be
this discussion.
exactly
But this is
so.
necessary. Commissioner, the other point I want you to give us your view on is the fact that there was an overwhelming support across the board on election day and after election day that the election process was free, fair, transparent, and credible. We heard that from Justice Singh herself, the chair. We heard that from the political parties contesting. And the point I want to bring you to is the fact that there's a change in the narrative coming from the APNO AFC. And I point to the dossier that they would have submitted by their lobbying firm, where they actually mentioned that the election process was free, fair, and credible, and that they had won the election. Now, when we look at what is coming out of the APNO AFC camp, they're talking about or accusing GECOM itself of not giving much attention to the process, and we've had a lot of irregularities, and now that there's a lot of doubt from their perspective, and they're trying to create this image as though the elections was not credible at the level of the commission, because we know that we have commissioners who are representing the APNO AFC, we have yourself and the other two commissioners representing the PPPC. Are there any discussions concerning this narrative coming out of the APNO AFC, and what are your views? Because the people of Ghana need to get as much clarity on this. I know that the General Secretary mentioned this yesterday, and we want to ensure that we can bring enough to bear on this issue to put it to rest, because we know that the process was free, fair, and credible. International observers were here. They've also said that. And now that they're shifting the narrative, we need to address it at not only the level, at the party level, but at the level of GECOM.
Well, the most I would say is that people are dealing in false negatives and trying to create a narrative. What the AP and AFC have to do is to coordinate their misinformation and lies. If it is that a political party is saying that they won an election, they should, as we have done, is to produce their SOPs.
Yes.
And to have those who are colluding in GECOM with them to produce the CEO's SOPs. We haven't been able to get those as yet. And so far in this process, there is not a single SOP in the PPPC's possession in this recount process, which has been proven wrong.
Yes.
Not a single one. The elections process on elections day were free and fair. The 9 regions were declared properly so. What happened with the elections process was the false Minglo declarations for Region 4, where he did not produce the SOPs in spite of being required by the court to so do.
Yes.
And that's why we're in this position. So even though the process on the day itself and the declaration in 9 regions were free and fair and credible on the face of it and are being proved so far as the counting is going,
Yes.
the change in the narrative and the confusion in the narrative has to rest on solid foundation. And the only solid foundation is for them to provide the SOPs, which were provided to all other political parties, the list in the regions, in the polling stations, and also that which is in possession of the CEO of GECOM. And I would say that we have, as commissioners ourselves on our side, most of those SOPs. We have those SOPs. So we know now that it's been exposed, the so-called Mingo Bingo, now that that is being exposed, they have a particular problem. And really they should give up. And Granger should concede and stop having our country go through this disreputable experience, even for his own legacy as a so-called respected leader, former leader of our country.
Yes.
So he should concede and bring the charade to an end. But they are unable to coordinate their narrative.
Okay.
One time they said in the dossier that the elections were free and fair. And then they said that they won the elections. Well, if you won the elections, put out your SOPs and let's match them all. They're not doing that. Why is that so? There could only be one reason: they're dragging out the process. And two, they know that they have lost. They know they have lost. And their independent sources, which indicate even in their own organization, in the police and the military, because they all write down the results. The police write down the results at the polling stations, and it is forwarded up. Everybody knows what the results of the elections are. They've lost, and they should concede.
Okay.
So, and let our country move forward.
Thanks for that, Commissioner.
It's an irrational position for them to take. For me, even as a political person, I'm not sure I want to see the destruction of the PNC, but it will destroy any credibility or support that they have. I mean, it's irrational even from the future perspectives of their own political party to be carried out through. In 2015, we accepted that we lost. We knew that there was rigging, but we took the position. Surge Valley wasn't going to count the 23 ballot boxes, which we knew were stuffed. They were other issues, but we conceded after 3-4 days. We did some demonstrations and we let them have the cake.
Yeah.
Here they've lost by 17,000 plus or more votes. And they cannot change anything by 1 vote or 2 votes or whatever in the recount.
Yes, I agree.
They'll have to be undertaken an enormous project and event to change those results. And they need to stop it. They're up to all kinds of nonsense all day. And compromising people who would otherwise not want to be compromised in this.
Yes.
But it will all be sorted out in the end.
I'm hopeful. Thank you, Commissioner. Before you go, I have one more question for you, and just so we can bring additional clarity to the public. Mingo's declaration, that is a store point here as we go through the daily counts, and we're seeing a pattern that is consistent with his false declarations. We're bringing it to the fore. We're bringing all of the variances to the public so that they can make their own comparisons as well using the SORs, SOPs along with Mingo's declaration. And we're arguing from our end that those declarations made by Mingo should be discarded because it should not form part of that structure because they were fraudulent. From your perspective, how practical can that be, given the fact that we know that there are operatives within GECOM that are actually trying to not allow the process to run smoothly and to have a conclusion that is consistent with what should be in conformity with the law?
Yeah, well, I would say that I wrote the chair and the commission several weeks ago, 4 or 5 weeks ago, saying that the declarations, the Region 4 declaration should be removed from the GECOM website, and that the particular Mingo's declaration should be discarded based on all the controversies and all the things which happened. The commission took a decision against our proposals to remove those, of saying that the results will be held in abeyance. the Alexander, the wordsmith for these things, that they will hold all the results in abeyance until we get the recount, which in my view allows us to run the risk of funny things happening. But so long now as we keep a strong engagement oversight with the recount process, and as they're exposed daily now, the Mingo declarations are being discarded ballot box by ballot box.
Yes.
It's not the people who are counting in the full view of the public, and it's being broadcast out there to the nation. The declarations are being discarded ballot box by ballot box. And maybe in one way, it's a good thing that it's this type of participatory process in a recount, which will in finality tramp the dirt down Mingo declarations.
Yes. Commissioner Benn.
So we are trapped dirt down on those declarations.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Benn, for your insights. And I think the Guyanese people would have gotten some good information that they can actually process, because every day we're trying to bring to the people of Guyana a balanced and objective approach to this issue, because it's a national effort. We're not playing politics now. We're trying to bring to the public what is factual, what is truthful, and what should stand in how the country should move forward as a collective, given the fact that we're now going through
whatever people's political perspectives are and how voted on, at the end of this process, we should be all the better for it in terms of integrity and understanding of our elections process, and that we can only better the process for the good of our country.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Benn, and thank you to our viewers out there for spending the last 15 minutes with us. Continue to track us and tune into us as we continue to update you daily on Recount Watch. Thank you very much and have a good evening and a safe weekend. Thank you, Commissioner.
All right, and be safe.
Thank you.